Hi everyone, my name's Emma and I'm a soon-to-be third-year medical student studying in Sydney, Australia. And today we have a little bit of a different setup than we normally do because I'm actually going to, hi Tuesday, film an interview with my friend, also named Emma, all about the GAMSAT. International student, I didn't have to write the GAMSAT to go to med school in Australia, but I do know a lot of students have to get into any post-grad programs here. So what I wanted to do was interview a friend of mine so that I can get some information for you and answer your questions. I asked you to submit them on Instagram, all about the GAMSAT, how to study for it, things like that. So today I'm sitting down virtually with Emma, also known as EmiiKate on Instagram. She's a final year medical student studying at Deakin, which is in Victoria for all of you international students. She's super active on Instagram as well as a blog and YouTube, helping out future students and current med students, sharing her journey, as well as sharing adorable pictures of her cats, so you know I'm a big fan. She's the founder of Med Mentors AU, which seeks to connect current medical students to students like you who are hoping to study medicine in Australia and just kind of connect and build a bit of a mentorship and foster community that way. All of her contacts and links and stuff will be down below. But we are sitting down virtually, so we have Zoom in front of us as well as our cameras, so if you see wandering eyes or sound funny bits, please don't judge. This is the first time we're doing something like this, but I think the content and all of the help is going to be worth it, so make sure you stick out through the video. I think it's going to be a bit of a long one, but thank you so much, Emma, for joining and being willing to answer all these questions. If you want to just kind of get started with just a little hello, a little bit about yourself, maybe like your GAMSAT or your pre-med journey in a nutshell.
No, well thanks for having me, Em. So fun to do little M versus M collaborations together, so This is super cute. So hi, I'm Emma as well. I suppose just in summary, I'm in my 4th year at Deakin University this year. That's always been my dream university. I've been trying to get in for a long time. I'm one of those GAMSAT horror stories, I suppose, because it took me 7 years of failed attempts before I finally got into medical school. So yeah, I have done the GAMSAT maybe over 12 times, but to be honest, I sort of lost count, so I'm sort of just estimating it at this point. I was doing the September and the March sitting every year, and I think I started from my 1st year of undergrad just as practice, so I have done it a lot. So I'm very passionate about this video because I hope that nobody else ever has to do it as many times as I did.
It also means that you've kind of tried and tested all of the tips you're going to give because you've tried multiple times. And I mean, I think that's pretty typical of an Australian student. A lot of people that I know connected to through Instagram, they've done it multiple times. So I think maybe 12 is a bit more than the average student, but definitely repeat testing is not anything to be ashamed of or anything abnormal. Seems like it's quite a trend to kind of at least do it once or twice to get used to it, and then you get down to how it actually works for you.
Yeah, definitely. And I think at the time, because there wasn't a huge Instagram or YouTube basis for this type of conversation, I felt really alone in how many times I was sitting it. I suppose I would get a new study buddy every year and they would get into medical school, and then I'd be like, what about me? When am I going to get in? But now that I am in, there's so many of us that have sat it like 10 times. So if anybody else is out there struggling, you're not alone.
Yeah. So as I said earlier, I asked questions on Instagram, and I've kind of filed them out into a bit of a sort of standing order that kind of will make sense. I will leave the chapters below so you can jump around if you have specific questions. But I guess we can kind of start with questions around getting started or setting up your study, that kind of thing. And we got a lot of questions asking what's the best materials to use or any particular resources that you found to be the most helpful, or as med students like to say, the most high yield.
So I think I've either tried or volunteered or worked for nearly every single GAMSAT thing that there is in Victoria anyway. So some of them are a bit blurred together, but I think the ones that really stand out, I guess for me, I think the thing that people really need to think about is that the GAMSAT my favorite quote is that the GAMSAT is like a smoothie, so you only get out what you put in. So if you sign up to any of these programs, just because you've signed up, it doesn't mean that you're guaranteed to get a good score. And even if you do it alone, it doesn't mean that you won't get a great score. It just matters like how consistent you are, how are you working to improve yourself, how much are you reflecting, how much time are you putting into this, like what your dedication level is. So at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter which program you choose or don't choose or which resources you want to try out. It's all about you, your mindset, finding out what works for you and listening to my advice, like this is what may have worked for me. And I think my biggest downfall was listening to others and taking what they said as gospel, because it doesn't always mean that it's going to work for you, because we're all different, we all have different strengths. But I suppose just my general advice is that you don't have to spend a lot of money to get into medical school if you don't want to. You can, I'm sure me and Emma can link a lot of the free resources that there are that you can use to get in, and just in your own preparation kit and make your own schedule. That's super, super easy to do, and as long as you're dedicated, that's an awesome decision. Otherwise, if you do a program and you've got the extra money, or you've got friends or family who are going to help you out financially, that's also awesome. And if you're the type of student that just needs that extra motivation and support, then that's great as well. But for me, I did a lot of different programs and I ended up getting in while I was using the gold standard. There's a lot of mixed reviews for the gold standard. Some people feel like they didn't get what they were looking for, but I just felt like they were next level supportive. I loved them, especially Gianni, who marks the essays. She is just amazing. She still messages me to this day, and it's been like 5 years since I've spoken to her just to check in and see how I'm going. She's a really amazing person, and the whole team is just really personable and lovely, and I just loved all of their resources for every section. But then since I've gotten into medical school, I've also worked for Frasers. They're pretty expensive, so I don't think as a student I could have personally afforded to do that course. So I understand for a lot of people that's difficult. But their program is run by medical students in Australia and is continually being updated year after year after year with new medical students who have just done the GAMSAT and just got in. So they've got the really fresh mindset, and they just churn it out all year, so they've just got endless material, and they're all so passionate about what they do. So that's a really, really good program in my opinion as well.
So someone said here, are prep courses worth it? Money in terms of improvement? Kind of sounds like you were saying it really depends on the one for you. So gold standard worked for you, it's the one that got in, but there's other ones that may work for other people. So you have to weigh that decision yourself, because it can get really expensive.
But I really believe that you don't need to do that to do well.
So start off with the free resources, which I'll try to link below, and see sort of how that goes, and then you can sort of add incrementally more. It's kind of what I did for my MCAT, is I used books because I could pay for the books, and then I tried to self-study, and it luckily worked out well enough for me to get here, but then I would add a course on afterwards. Someone else asked if you had a study schedule. I guess if you were doing any self-study, and how did you sort of parse that out?
So I suppose for most people doing the GAMSAT, it depends if it's your first time or second time, but I suppose we'll just talk about it as if it's your first time. Most people are probably aware that it takes about 6 months of reasonably full-time-ish study to tackle the GAMSAT well for your first time. So if you're in your final year of your undergraduate, or you're in your honours year, or you're working, you really have to juggle that with what you're doing at the time and how much time you can reasonably give yourself to study and do well, and how much of the material you think you might be okay at already. So if you haven't written an essay for years, like, you're gonna need a lot of time to practice as many essays as humanly possible. And if you haven't done a science course, if you're a nurse or an engineer, which is still kind of a science, but if you haven't done the biological type of sciences, and it's a little bit rusty since maybe high school, or you've never done that before, then that's going to take a lot of time as well to go through everything and sort of get your mindset around almost a new language, really. So it's going to be very individual, so you sort of just have to look at how much time you actually have, how much time you can sort of wiggle away to it. So is there anything that you can sort of drop? If you're working full time, can you maybe take a 1 day a week or a half day or something out of your schedule? I know it's not possible for everybody, but just working out what you can do to make your number one dream like a reality. Like, what are you going to give to this? Because it's really important. And I know that a lot of people working full time and studying full time struggle with this added extra study on top. But working that out first so you can make your schedule, because it might mean that you need to be studying for a whole year because you've only got a limited amount of time, or you might only need a few weeks if you've taken a month off your job, or you've got a month off uni or something, and that's going to be your time and that's going to be all that you personally need. Like, that's great, but it is really individual.
Okay, I can kind of add, like, when I was looking at my MCAT, which I know is not a direct one-for-one, but it's pretty close. I was working full-time in the summer and I was studying in the evenings, but I had a science background. What I did was I took a practice test, like a pretty inexpensive practice test first, saw the areas that I was weakest in, and focused my study on that. And what I did, because I don't work well with like very strict goals of like, oh, you need to learn this evening, it was I need to do this many chapters in my review books every evening, and I spent and did the first ones were the areas where I was the weakest first. So you kind of, as you were saying, like, need to find your weak point and need to know that the energy needs to go into that, but you also need to kind of know how you learn and how much time you can give. So I gave probably about 6 months, like 5 or 6 months, almost full time. I was like doing 2 jobs. One was MCAT and one was work. But that's what worked for me, and it may not be the same for everybody else. But I think, yeah, like knowing where you need to put the energy, that's going to be the sort of most strategic way to set up a study schedule.
Definitely. And I think, funnily enough, I think 90% of people, that's 100% how it works. Find your weaknesses, make them your strengths. But I think for at least 6 years, I was listening to that advice, and that's what I was doing. And my section 3 was just the same year after year after year, despite being a scientist. I never failed it, but it was just never high enough to get a good score overall, which was very frustrating. But then I met a nurse who was in her 2nd year at Deakin University and of medical school, and she told me that the way that she got in, because obviously she'd never even done science before, was to just, get the bare minimum, just pass that section. But she was really good at essays, and she asked me, are essays your strength? And I was like, yes. And she's like, forget your weakness. If you're just passing it, like, that's fine. Focus on your strength. So I did that for my last year, and I smashed the essays, and my score was so much higher than ever before, and I got in. So don't always listen to everybody else's advice. Like, you're just going to have to do what you think works best for you and is going to give you the highest score overall.
And if you are a repeat taker, maybe shift your strategy, right? Like, if you're feeling kind of stuck on one part, maybe as long as you're passing that, you can really throw into the others. And I know I would assume every med school, there's like a minimum you've got to get, but some are going to look at different sections differently. Some really want that really good essay, and some really want the really good science. Pass everything, and then make yourself stand out where you actually already shine. That could be a really good strategy too.
Yeah, I love that advice. And you're so right. Like, some schools will weight the science section, so it ends up being more important, which I think is why I was so obsessed with increasing my score in that particular section for so long. But other schools, they don't care as much. They want equal weighting against all of them, and then you end up getting a higher score at those schools. So you can be strategic down the line when you apply as well.
And most schools will list their application requirements. It'll be online, or it'll be through GAMSAT. Is that the right acronym? And you can find out that information, or contacting alumni or current students and asking, like, hey, where was your score strong, or did it matter, that kind of thing. Those are all great questions to ask specific students if you know the school you want to go to. But speaking of studying, we've kind of already talked about study strategy, which is awesome. Someone kind of asked, I think we've touched on it, but someone did ask specifically, how do you know if you're studying the right way?
That's a really good question. I don't think there is a right way. There's definitely a lot of wrong ways, but everybody's right way is going to be unique. So I suppose the number one tip that I give people that I believe strongly is the wrong way after stuffing it up for 6 years is thinking that you're going to get into by reading a lot of textbooks and spending all your time like whether or not you want to improve your section 3 or it is your strength or whatever, when you're preparing for section 3, it usually takes the most amount of your time. And it's usually because people are too scared to jump into the practice questions straight away, and they spend all of their time just reading background material. And even as a science student, a nurse, like whatever you've come from before, everybody's still tempted that same amount, like I need to know all this background information, and they go to textbooks and they go to Khan Academy, and that's all great if you're really, really struggling with like a physics concept or something and you just want to quickly go over it. But that should not be the majority of your study, because the science section, although it's called the science section, is not really science. It's a lot different to the MCAT in that way, because there are...
we have like real science questions, like solve this physics question.
Exactly.
And I've heard that the GAMSAT's different.
The GAMSAT is more so it takes science terms and puts them into a riddle. So there's no chance that you will have come across this information before, because the whole test is designed to find out not what you know, but how you think. So it can't bias anybody. It can't give science students an advantage when studies show that science students actually make the worst doctors in the long run. So that's why we've made such a change, because we want to change the playing field so that people from other degrees who actually make better doctors in the long run have an equal chance of getting in. Because of the way that their mind works, they're not disadvantaged by the science section. So it's all about your problem solving, and the only way to get your mental gymnastics ready for this problem solving is to practice the questions. Like, you need to build those new neural pathways in your brain to think outside the square and use new information to get to the answer. So it doesn't matter how many textbooks you read, none of that is going to come up. You're going to need to understand like the basics to be able to read the question and move the material in your mind.
There was a little bit of technical difficulties, that's okay, but if anything has changed, lighting or positioning, that's why. Do you have tips for completing the test on time? I know within its time frames. I know we've touched on, if you're not getting it, move on, but are there any other strategies that you have?
It's really important that every time you're doing your practice questions or your practice essays that you're doing it to the time limit. It doesn't matter if you're only going to be doing it for half an hour, so you're not going to do both essays, or you're not going to finish a full-length test or anything like that, but just make sure it's the amount of minutes per question that you're allotting to whatever time frame you're working with. So I think, don't quote me on this, we'll have to look it up, but I think it's 1.3 minutes for section 1 or 2, and the other's like 1.5 minutes per question, I think, roughly. So just times how many questions you feel like you're going to be doing that day by that, and then that's your time limit for the day. And then you will just normally get used to that. You will just eventually know that that's your pace, and that's what you should be up to, and you won't even have to think about it in the exam.
Yeah, I think it really is. It's the same thing that we did for the MCAT. Is every practice test I tried to write in sort of test conditions as much as possible, and then you just kind of get into that rhythm of, and like, oh, I've been on this for too long, and you also can kind of get a sense of like, oh, I've been moving through these and I'm confident, so that's good. I've picked up a few minutes for the end, that kind of thing too. And now we can jump into, we had some specific questions about each section. So I guess we'll start with section 1, which I just learned is called Reasoning in Humanities and Social Sciences. Do you have any specific tips for that section?
So I think this one is actually the hardest one for people to do better on, because it's just one of those things that people find it really hard to study for. They say that some people either get it or they don't, but I think that you can improve. One, you can improve your speed reading pretty easily by just reading anything you want. It can be reading long Instagram posts, blogs, just random things on the internet, Harry Potter, like whatever you enjoy reading. Read a lot, and try to read broadly, different perspectives, different genres of things, because you never know what might pop up in section 1. It used to be really, really abstract type of things, which it could go back to at any point. And it was just like in English pentamina and like random poems and random tiny bits of books about some war you've never heard of in a country you've never heard of type of thing. And like you just had no idea what was going on. But I feel like my last couple of years, it slowly started pushing towards everything had a bit of a theme to do with medicine. Like one year I remember there was a question to do with like the show House and how the audience portrays him versus how they were writing him and stuff like that. It was really interesting. But I think the biggest tip is, one, improve your speed reading so you can get through those really lengthy paragraphs and things quickly, so you can get to the questions quickly. And two, every time you're reading something, if you get to the end of the page or the end of the blog or whatever you're reading, imagine to yourself, if I had to explain this to my little sister or a little kid, can I explain it, one, from the writer's perspective or the author's perspective? Can I explain it from all of the characters that were involved from their perspective? Like, because all of the questions sort of end up being about that. So you have to be able to know every different angle that you can interpret this piece from and be able to explain it to be able to find that answer, if that makes sense.
That does. That sounds a lot like our critical analysis and reasoning section, which, like, I think I got a paragraph about like art history, and it was asking like, so why do you think the painter was, what were they feeling when they found this out? And I was like, okay. Yeah, we had one specific question for this section of, did you find it more helpful to read the questions and then the text, or the text and then the question?
Again, super individual. When I was doing the gold standard, they really advocated for reading the questions first and then going into the paragraph. But I found when I was doing that it was swaying my interpretation from the start, because I was looking for these questions, and I feel like for me that didn't work, because you're supposed to get the entire vibe of the whole piece to properly answer the questions. And for me, I felt like the GAMSAT almost sets it up, like, if you go for the questions first, you might actually stuff it up, because
they lead you, purposely kind of lead you in the wrong direction.
Yeah, and they kind of are trying to look for the people who are doing that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But, you know, that's just my opinion from my trials and errors and practice tests, just personally.
Yeah.
But I think try each and see which works for you.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Like, do some questions, like do some practice questions, and like specifically try to read the questions first and see if that kind of taints your view or changes the vibe. And go back to the same thing. So like, do one practice little set like 1 week, and do it one way. So maybe do the questions first, and then like a week later, when maybe you've kind of forgotten some of it, do it again and see if you've changed your answers because of that. I think I did that with our critical analysis section, and it kind of blew my mind sometimes. I'm like, oh, it's really different.
Agreed.
That was the only question for section 1 specifically. Section 2 is reasoning in communications. Do you have any specifics, like, or any sort of tips for that section? Yeah,
so these are your essays. You're gonna have to practice writing a lot of essays. There's heaps of really good free generators out there. I think Phrases has one. We've got a few links on the Med Mentors page that you can use, and they'll generate the quotes for you just like on the day, and you can use those as practice. Otherwise, even if you don't have a computer with you, or you're out at work or whatever, if you're listening to the radio, if you're watching TV, if you see an ad for something, like, that's pretty topical, and there's a chance that it could come up no matter what it is, because you never know. Just like take a note in your phone, like, oh, that could be an interesting topic, and then just write an essay on it. It doesn't even have to be good, but at the end of writing the essay, try to always time yourself, no matter which section you're practicing for. Always time yourself to the time limit of the real test, because that's how you're going to improve. There's no point spending like 4 days on an essay. That's not going to help. But try to do everything that you're practicing for under the specific time limit for that section. So use half an hour or so to do all of your essays, and then go back to them, edit them, change them, like, find out what you did right, what you would change, rewrite it under the same time limits, and make it better if you can. And then once it's really good, or even if just a paragraph or a few lines in it are really good, take that and make a document somewhere, whether you put it in a scrapbook or you have a Google Drive or something going on. Take all the best parts, or your entire essay if you love it enough, put them all together in a document and read that once a week. Because by the time you get to the actual GAMSAT, all of that is going to be in the forefront of your mind, and if any of those topics happen to come up, you've already got a paragraph, like, you just have to fill in the rest. And it makes your writing so much faster, and you already have it like word for word perfect in your mind of how you want it to come across. And then you can tweak it a little as well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And just kind of leading off that, some people have asked possible topics or questions. It kind of sounds like it could be anything.
So there's a lot of really good resources out there that tell you what they are. I have a blog on this. I haven't put it on the Med Mentors page because I'm not sure if I've accidentally stolen it from one of the GAMSAT courses that I've done in the past. So I haven't put it on the GAMSAT, on the Med Mentors page, but I have got a blog. So if you go to my blog, you'll be able to find it there. And it's every single essay that's ever come up on the GAMSAT before. I think the only one that wasn't on it was pets, which we had one year, but heads up, even pets is a go-to. But if you write an essay on every single one of those essays, you're pretty sweet for the exam, I'd say.
Someone asked about becoming more well-read in social issues. So if you see something come up on the radio or like a news blast, like I could foresee future ones including some things about pandemics and such, because they're trying to get out that like communication and the critical thinking about what's going on in the world around you, but everything's going on in the world around you. So, but we'll definitely link that below so you've got some places to start your practice. Someone specifically asked, do you include stats? And I believe they mean statistics.
Yep. So I think definitely, especially if you've written an essay on every single topic in your prep, and just write it how you would normally write it in your timed half an hour, then edit it to make it better, and then rewrite it to make sure that you can actually write that in the half hour. But in your rewrite and your editing, you can look up stats, you can look up, like in mine I had song lyrics, like I actually quoted the Black Eyed Peas in one of mine. Like whatever you want to put in there, like bring in things that make you look worldly and well-rounded and like you can connect to a lot of people, because that's what this section is looking for. Like this is the only section that you get to show your personality, and the only section where the examiners are looking at you like, can I see this human being being a good doctor and a good medical student? Because that's what this whole section is for. So if you're coming across not going to be a good doctor, can't communicate, everything that you're saying is the same as everybody else, like they're not gonna give you a good score. But if you're unique and individual and you talk about your own things that you've been through in your life, especially in the first essay, you're just changing the game and you're going to be on a whole other level to everybody else. So bring in whatever you want, like talk about a PlayStation game, talk about your favorite book, talk about what's in the news, talk about what happened to you when you were 4. If it's relevant and you can write about it well, do it.
That kind of answers the next question that someone had, which was what the markers are looking for. Sounds like they're looking for you and your ability to communicate you through this topic.
Yeah. And like it's about how you communicate you, your personality, your experiences, your viewpoints, but it's also being able to look at other people's viewpoints, even if you disagree, and understand them from that perspective as well, because that also makes a really good doctor. So a lot of the argumentative pieces, they're looking to see, can you see both sides of the argument? A lot of people will go in thinking like, oh, I have to show them that I'm right and why I'm right. But you need to show that you can understand it from another person's perspective as well. You can still come to the conclusion that you're right at the end, but if you don't show the reasoning behind why other people disagree and why there's another side to this story, they're not going to think that you're a good doctor, because you need to be unbiased as a doctor and understand that not everybody's going to have the same viewpoints as you are.
Yeah, and you need to be able to put yourself in other people's shoes to understand the context in which they are coming to you within. That's my public health coming in. But so you need to start showing that already and show that you can see both sides even if you still think yours is right. Which also lovely leads into the next question, which someone said, did you write an argumentative approach or did you do for and against?
I suppose for me, I just use like the basic essay structure that they teach you in high school. So the first piece is usually more reflective. So I try to get really personal in that. Like I spoke about my times struggling with an eating disorder. I spoke about how I'd sat the GAMSAT over 12 times and like this is my dream, and it's really disappointing to me that I'm struggling so much to get here. And like I just talked from the heart about stuff in my life, and I feel like that got me a pretty good score, and seems to be a running trend between people I know that got really good scores, rather than just like sort of everything from another perspective. Like I was really honest and raw about me, and I feel like that really connects with people who are reading it. And if you can reach the examiner on an emotional level, they're really going to give you a good score, because they've literally read 100 that day. They're over it. They're sick of spelling mistakes. They're sick of the same quote. Like but if you can then suddenly make an emotional reaction from them, like, you stand out. So talk from the heart in probably the first essay, and then the second essay is more argumentative, although you can do whatever you want. Choose your own writing style. This is just the generic format that most of us use. The second one is more argumentative, and it's totally fine if you want to do for and against, because that helps highlight both perspectives, which is good, you're ticking that box. Or you can just really gung-ho destroy somebody else's argument and show why you're right, but just make sure that you're doing it in a way that you're not insulting the other side, because doctors don't do that. We don't tell people who are anti-vaxxers that they're an idiot. Like, we need to understand where they're coming from, otherwise you're not going to have a proper conversation or make a change or help a person if they don't want to be helped by you because you're insulting them. So do it delicately.
I think that in general is like a really good tip for, I think, specifically this part of the GAMSAT, but also carrying forward to interviews and stuff, is think, how would I as a doctor answer this? So pull in yourself, but also pull in those years more of education and how you would respond to a patient or a person sitting in front of you that trusts you, that is looking for your advice, but is also looking for a safe space. That's what I always try to think of for interviews. It sounds like this section's kind of almost like a pre-interview in that way, where it's like, how would you, as a doctor considering the other person in front of you, argue this? So I think that's like a really good tip to like hold on to now and carry forward as you go through the rest of the application. Someone asked the question, how many words should your essays be?
Whatever you can do. Some people can write 3 pages in that half an hour, and other people can only write 1. But at the end of the day, it's about the content, the communication, and just all the things that we were talking about just before. As long as you're bringing those through, it doesn't matter how long it really is, as long as it's to the point and gets what you want said. But if it's just going to be 3 pages of waffle, then it's useless. And the examiner has just read 100 other waffly essays, and they're getting bored by the time they get to the last paragraph of yours. Then don't do it. Just do a short one if that's better. But the same, if yours is too short and you're not used to writing quick enough or thinking quick enough to get these words on the page, and you only get half of your thoughts out, or you haven't really rounded up your arguments, then that's going to be a bit disappointing to read for the examiners as well. So there is no word limit, it's just whatever works for you. I happen to be one of those weird people that can write like 5 pages in half an hour, and that I work really hard to sort of cut that down because I waffle. You may be able to realize that from this video. But yeah, you just have to make sure that your content, it's what's in the essay that counts, not how many words.
Yeah, so that comes back to when you're checking over your own essays and you're reading through them and you're editing them, are you waffling for a whole paragraph? Stop writing that 6th paragraph. Or are you not getting your full point across? I find too, just thinking about that, one possible thing is have other, like, not med friends, but other people look at your essays and ask them, what's my argument? What am I saying? And if they can't interpret that, then you can't be sure the examiner will. So that will tell you, are you maybe waffling, or are you not using enough space to get your point across?
Yeah, I agree. I think my biggest tip for essays is getting a group together as soon as possible. We've got a link, if you want, in the Med Mentors page that you can put your name and whatever email contact you want down, and people can contact you and you can form a group and you can mark each other's essays. You can also do that on the Paging Doctor forum, or just friends at your uni if you want to. Just find a group, 1 or 2 people, it could be 7 people if you want. 1, you get free marking of your essays at the level that you're expected to mark, because everybody's at that level at this point. And 2, you marking somebody else's essay actually gives you so many more skills than you realize. Like, you might feel like, oh, I'm wasting my time, I should be writing them. But you actually get this viewpoint that the examiner sees, and you start writing differently after you start doing that. You start writing better because you know what feels good to read and what sounds good in your own head. And then not only will you walk into that exam with all of the things and all of your ideas that you already have, but all of the friends' essays that you've read as well. So you're just increasing everything that you're going in with.
Yeah, I think it's always great if you can find a group of people or one person, however many, that you work well with and that you're comfortable working with. Start working on those asking for help skills, because yeah, you just get that much more sort of background in your mind that you can bring forward. So that's a really good tip. And then for section 3, reasoning in biological and physical science, any specifics there? I know you said originally you really focused on it and then you kind of just let it be what it was going to be. Anything, someone specifically asked how you made an educated guess during this section.
Yeah, so that's a really good question. I suppose, like, there's always going to be those questions that you just don't know the answer. Like, you have no idea what's going on in the STEM. You're looking at the answers and you're like, wouldn't have even thought of any of those being related to this question whatsoever. It's all hieroglyphics. I have no idea what's going on. It's going to happen. It happens to all of us. I think the scary thing to keep in mind is some of the questions in section 1 and 2 will not get marked. So do not spend half an hour on one question just trying to get that one question right, because it might be like an experiment question that they're just trialing that year, and if a lot of people fail it, they're not even going to include it, or it might just be in there and it's not going to be included for that year. It'll be included a different year, so it may not get marked, especially if it's really, really hard. So don't waste your time on the really hard ones because it's not worth it. The other part is they have questions that are linked together, so not all of the questions are worth 1 mark, although most people think that they are. So they can tell when you're guessing. So if you got like the other 3 questions that are linked to this question correct, and then you get that one wrong, you'll still get a good level of marks. But if you're like up and down all over the place, they know that you guessed them. So even if you get them right, it's still not as many points as somebody else that got them all right, because they obviously know that that person knows it, if that makes sense. So they try to rule out luck as much as they can. But at the end of the day, I'm sure there's a lot of people in there that would agree they just got in with luck. So
I guess in a way, just to kind of explain that linking as someone who's hearing it for the first time, it's like if there were 4 questions about apples and you got the first 3 about these apples correct, and the 4th one you were a bit thrown off on, they would still see, oh, they're understanding the process of apples. And so therefore we're okay with them getting this one wrong, and we'll kind of forgive them because clearly they know what they're talking about. Where if there were those 3 questions of apples and you guessed the whole way and you got 2 right, but then you got 2 right in the questions about oranges, they're going to be like, oh, this person's kind of fiddling their way through. They don't actually know it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Except it's not like if you get 4 physics questions or if you get 4 biological questions, it's more like this one needs this part of the brain to work this out. Yeah. This one needs this sort of context and reasoning to figure out. So it sort of ranks the types of thinking to make sure that you're going to be a doctor with a mindset that's going to meet a patient, you're going to listen to them thoroughly, you're going to have all of the information in front of you. It's going to be a complete mystery, it might be new to you, but do you have the power in your brain to figure this out?
Wow, that's fascinating. The amount of effort that goes into writing and like designing these tests, as much as I hate standardized testing, kind of blows my mind.
It's crazy.
And I guess like a point on sort of the, if you're not getting it, move on. That's what I'm getting a lot. Like I've been doing a GAMSAT series on my Instagram, and a lot of people are saying the same thing. Especially, even if you think, so if you spend 20 minutes on this one question, that's like 4 other questions you could have answered. So even if you get that one wrong because you just guessed, or you made sort of you narrowed it down and you made a guess, you've answered those other 4, so that's more chances for more correct answers. It's worth investing time in the questions that you are going to get right than missing all of those because you've just been hung up on one that may not even matter.
Exactly. And I think the people that score the highest as well, they missed the last 20 questions, but they just got so many of the other ones right that it doesn't matter. So if you get 20 questions wrong, or you don't get to the last 20 questions, like, don't worry about it. If you don't have time to go back to them, don't worry about it. It's fine. Like, the best of the best, the people with the top scores, don't see the last 20, 30, 40 questions sometimes. So don't try to sit it and aim just to answer every question, because you might be spending not quite enough time on the ones that you're really about to smash.
So again, it's that knowing, same all the way back to the beginning of the conversation, knowing where you shine and remembering that during the test and being like, oh, this is my jam, I'm gonna answer this one because you know it. And if you remember that too, it's kind of like a little self-boost of confidence throughout. If you're like, oh, I'm good at this, this is in my wheelhouse, and you can kind of hunker down into that question for a second, take the time, answer it, and keep going, because that's always like a nice little pat on the back.
Exactly.
We had one question sort of, I guess, for the retakers. If you've already taken it, how do you improve after that? And we've already kind of touched on that. Is there anything else you wanted to add to that conversation?
I think you have to sit down and be really, really, really honest with yourself. How badly do you want this? And look back at how you've done your journey so far. Have you actually given yourself enough time? I know for a lot of people who are in their third year and they're trying to keep their GPA up and they're juggling studying for the GAMSAT on top, it can be really hard. And in that situation, you have to prioritize your GPA because you only have one, and it's going to take you another 3 years sometimes if you have to do a whole other degree to increase your GPA enough if you don't do well. And honours can only do so much. But if you've flunked third year because you were concentrating too much on the GAMSAT, there's no going back from that. Like, you can sit the GAMSAT a million times, it's only going to be an extra year. So focus on third year. And if that means that you haven't done so well on that GAMSAT that year, then sit down and work out, how much time do I actually need for this? Should I not take a full-time job? Should I not do honours? It's personal and it's up to you, but you just have to be honest with yourself. How much do I want this, and how much do I want it by the end of this year, and how much do I need to do to get over the line? So if it's essays, how much time am I going to dedicate to that? How many essays am I going to do? Am I going to find an essay group? Like, what am I going to do differently? And how much time is that going to take? And how am I going to make this a reality? And that's going to be completely different for everyone. But if you hold on to the same things in your head, you're going to get the same results. If you're going to be like, oh, I can juggle everything, but obviously it didn't work last year, don't juggle everything again. And I know that's really hard. I was struggling financially as well, and I couldn't give up my full-time job. But I was really lucky that I worked with doctors, and I told them that I wanted to be a doctor. And I told them that I was going to quit and I was going to focus on this, but they ended up telling me that they'll just replace me for 1 month and then I have to come back. So I just smashed out my study full time in 1 month, and my friend lived on a farm, and just he and I were alone. We turned our phones off, we had no technology, and we just GAMSAT studied for 1 month straight, and that's what worked for us. If that doesn't work for you, that's totally fine. If you just want to set your Saturdays aside for a whole year and just have no distractions, do that. But you just have to be clear from the start. You have to sit down, reflect, work out what you need to do, and then how you're going to do it, and then stick to it.
You'll have the score, like your breakdown, your scores from last, so you'll know where your strengths and weaknesses are, and you can really get down into the nitty-gritty of, okay, why didn't I do better in this section, and what other methods can I try and change up? I'm a big fan of pay attention to how you learn best, and use that method. Don't use methods just because other people are telling you. So if you studied one way and got a score that you're not happy with, try swapping it up and try something new.
And that'll really, really help you for medical school as well.
Yeah, because, oh man, you gotta keep track. I feel like I'm learning new study methods more than I'm learning more medicine, but yeah, I think it is just like you have to. And also that self-reflection and that grit and that willingness to self-critique and change yourself will come through in your future interviews, in your med school career, and once you're finally a doctor. Like, I always say, like, the most dangerous doctor is one who's not willing to ask for help and one who's not willing to change. So you're already, by having to take it multiple times, you're already demonstrating you're willing to adapt, improve, reflect, change, and sometimes ask for help. And I think those are good traits for a doctor.
Yeah, bring that up in your interview, because I love that.
Like, I say all the time, like, I didn't get into med school in Canada, and I think that failure to get in, A, helped me double down on really wanting to get in, and B, is something I can rely on when I'm, like, struggling now in med school. I can say, like, you've surpassed other hurdles in the past. Like, you have come through things before, you can come through this. So retaking it, like we've said, very common, and it can actually be a really good development time as well.
Oh, definitely. If you haven't completely changed who you are as a person by the end of your GAMSAT study, you're doing it wrong.
That's so true. I'm a shell of a human from my Anyway.
But remember your self-care and your work-life balance and all those things too, yeah? We had some questions sort of about like the day of or like the test itself. Do you have any tips for either like the day before, the night before, or the day of the test?
I actually probably got a little bit extreme with this just because I was sitting it for so long. But I got to the point where I was like training for this like an athlete would train for whatever their specialty is. So like I would eat, sleep, drink, like go to the toilet at the same times for a month that I would on the GAMSAT, because that just completely took away the whole human factor. Like I wasn't hungry in section 3 because my body was just used to when I was gonna eat.
When we eat, yeah.
Like I was eating this exact same food for a whole month. Like this is extreme, you don't have to do this, but you know, if you want to. Like, and then, because I feel like I was one of those people that really burned out in section 3 because I was just so hungry and I was having like really high sugary foods in the lunch break, and then I'd be ecstatic and then burn out really quickly and then be dying towards the end and just be over it. So I sort of got rid of all of that factor and was eating like a really good diet and was making sure that I was having multigrains and things that were going to last a long time for the second section, and I was only going to the toilet during the break times instead of in the middle of my exam time, and all of that just worked really, really well for the exam day because I felt like that was actually a big issue for me, and it was like breaking my concentration and I wasn't performing at my peak. So if you want to get that extreme, there's that. But on the day, get there on time. If you want to get there early and chill out and meditate, stay away from the other people because they are stressed. You don't want that energy. You don't want to overhear conversations because people are just going to be scaring each other, freaking out, projecting. Like, don't get that on you. Don't need that. Just be zen, go somewhere, listen to your favorite song, wait for everybody to settle down. Do not be the first one in that room because they have to sign everybody in one by one. I know they're doing it sort of online now in batches, so it might not be as bad as it used to be. But once you're in there, you're in the exam, you're under exam conditions, you have to sit there silently and wait for every other person to sit down. So try to be the last person, that's what I did. And then you don't have to worry, and then it's just like, you don't have to sit there for half an hour waiting. You can just go pee 20 times because you're nervous, listen to your favorite song, pump yourself up, meditate, whatever you want, and then go in, and then they'll hand you your test and just get on with it. For lunch, bring your lunch, because horror stories for people that didn't bring their lunch and there's nowhere to go or there's not enough time. With the new electronic version, I know there was 150 people or 200 people in this building, and I had to go down an elevator 11 at a time, and by the time that they finally all got out, the break was over and nobody ate and they all had to start going back up the elevator. It was a disaster. Or like the lines are so long for people wanting coffees and things. Like, just bring your food. It just takes all the stress out of it. You can find somewhere mellow, chill out. Again, try not to talk to other people, even if it's your best friend in the whole world that you're sitting in the GAMSAT with. If they are a stress head, see you later. Just go chill out, watch this YouTube if you want. We'll be there supporting you. Like, do something else. Or like, bring your document on your phone or something with you for all your like tips for the section 3 that you can go over if that's what you want to do. Otherwise, just chill out, watch your favorite YouTube or something, and just like zen yourself ready for the next part.
Yeah, I will definitely echo the same thoughts of just get in your own zone. I mean, I still do that for med school exams. I have like a specific playlist that's full of pump up jams, which includes Mulan's Make a Man Out of You, because for some reason that just like gets me in the zone. And yeah, avoid other people, but have your time. I also always say, like, there's nothing weird about taking like a test drive to the location you need to go at the same time, like the week before, so you can kind of like map out your journey and you know that you'll be able to get there in X amount of time. I'm someone that gets stressed out by being late, and my late is anything later than 15 minutes early. So, and yeah, bring good food that will sustain you, not like, I know, and like maybe a little comfort food, like a little bit of chocolate, but also something wholesome that's actually gonna fuel you. I think that tips goes for any sort of long marathon test. And hey, if you spend a whole month getting ready for it, that might like get you in some like sick like athlete mindset, like you said, like you are now a machine, you're a GAMSAT writing machine, and you could do this. That always works. We had someone ask what to bring. I know we've touched on good food. Is there anything else you'd recommend?
You need to bring like a clear water bottle. I don't know if they would accept this lid really, but it needs to be a clear water bottle. Don't bring a glass one, because one year I saw a girl put it on the floor in front of me and it smashed into a million pieces, and then she spent the next 20 minutes crying, and we were under exam conditions and I just wanted to hug her and I couldn't. So that was really distracting. Don't do that. And then she had no water.
Your personal essay, your reflective essay now becomes about how you just wanted to hug this girl who's like water bottle broke.
The poor girl, she's just silently sobbing. Oh, poor thing. So don't do that. No glass ones. But just like your regular pump bottle or whatever, take the labels off, bring that. Keep it under the table, not on the table, because you don't want to destroy your paper or the computer or whatever you're doing it on. Bring headphones so that you can chill out in the break. Bring your phone. Bring anything that makes you feel good. If that means like you want to bring notes so that you can look over them in your breaks or before the session starts, do that. Or bring them just so you can have them there for osmosis even if you don't touch them. Yeah, that's about it really. And I try to bring like chocolate, like Emma said, but I save mine until the end because you're so mentally drained and exhausted and all I want to do is pig out by the end of it. So something to look forward to at the end is always good.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like don't plan anything big afterwards. I had a friend who said they were basically in like a coma for 3 days afterwards. So don't plan unless you know you've done your practice test that's a full length practice and you were super energized by it. I personally get real adrenaline like during a test, but I feel like most people, you're burnt out. Give yourself time to recover, maybe a beach day the day after, but nothing high commitment. I also say like for test writing, dress in a way that you're comfortable but also like that you're showing up for a test. Like that's the way I work. I could never be with my brain on in sweatpants and PJs, so I didn't wear sweatpants and PJs the day of my big test. So think of things like that, like something that's not going to be like not itchy or like not too tight while you're sitting, but something that still makes you feel like you can write a test. And power to you if you can write a test in sweatpants. I'm very jealous.
And also try to wear layers if you can, because the test rooms can be really cold or really hot depending on the weather, and there's nothing you can do about it. So just be prepared to like take layers off, put layers on, and at different times of the day as well.
Yeah, like old faithful cardigan, the study cardigan. It's
Yeah.
just like a library day. Like that's kind of how you have to prepare. We had a question about how did you manage your nerves?
Good question. I was so nervous, and I think by the end of it I was like, I really just get PTSD from the whole situation. It's just, it was all too much. But I feel like I was really, really nervous every year until the lady at the start, and I don't know if they still do this, but they did it for the 7 years that I was there. She would like start talking to you and tell you good luck, and I told myself that I'm allowed to be as nervous as I want leading up to it, but the minute that lady starts talking, it's show starting, game on, like nerves have to wait until the end of it, and we can be nervous for like a month until we get our results. But from the time that woman starts talking, saying these are the rules today and you get your test, to the time she says the same thing every year, something about, you know, good luck, we hope you become doctors, and for the rest of you, we'll see you next year. So, you know, until she says that, then you can start being nervous again. But I just like, I really pump myself up that that's my time limit for being nervous, is when that lady starts talking.
Yeah, I think like some other, in general, like managing nerves is, again, like finding your pre-study routine of like, what makes you calm down or pump up. Like I kind of lean into the nerves and I'm just like, okay, we're nervous, we're just gonna get ready. And then I go in like super amped. Maybe not always the best test strategy, but so far so good. But figure out which way works best for you. If that is like sort of meditating, mindfulness, calm music beforehand and leaning into that. But I always, when I get super nervous, even for tests now, I just remind myself like, you have worked really hard up until this point. You have done everything you can do to do this. And like I can tell myself that it's a fact. There's no questioning that. So you can do this. And I focus on that of just like, it's possible. No, oh, but if next year, no thinking about plan B, no thinking about alternatives. Just, you've got this because you have worked your butt off to get to where you are now. So now it's just time to let that work come through. That's kind of like my little self-talk while I'm ignoring all of the other test takers that I give myself, is just, yeah, like developing that mantra of just like, you have worked really hard, you can do this, and just repeating that and over to yourself. You're going to be nervous no matter what, so it is, again, knowing yourself. Think back to your uni exams. Were you a nervous person that took that in kind of like me, like an aggressive way, and like leaned into it with like angry music? Or are you someone that gets really nervous but like deep breaths work? My one strategy, because sometimes my nerves cause me to speed read and miss questions properly, like I don't read them, so double negative questions really trip me up because I don't read the like, which of these is incorrect, that kind of thing. So I did 2 things for written tests, so it won't work if it's on the computer, but I would hold my water bottle in 2 hands, so like if this is my pen cup, in 2 hands, and read the whole question. I'm not allowed to touch anything, I'm not allowed to circle any answers until I've read the whole question. And the other tip to manage that kind of nerves is I would circle or cross out the last period of every question to make sure I read it. So it was like, read the whole thing, and then you're allowed to answer questions. Those are 2 tricks. The water bottle one only works if you have a strong bladder, because if you're drinking water every time you're reading a question, don't maybe for the GAMSAT, but hold it. If you're someone who works too fast, or their hands work before their brain when they're nervous, sit on your hands, cross them, put them down, and read the thing fully, because that's how my nerves manifest. But that's the thing, you need to figure out how your nerves manifest, and find some strategies for that. But that's one tip that I always share. And we're almost getting there. We only have a few questions left. So moving on to sort of after the test, we had a couple people saying sort of like, what did you do afterwards? Or like, what are sort of your next steps? Did you just ignore it and be nervous for the next month? Or did you, like, what did you do sort of after you've recovered from the test itself?
I think for me, I just went with the flow and allowed what was going to come. Because some exams I was like, I feel absolutely horrible about that. I hate this. I just want to be put out of my misery. I want to know how I did. And then I was so anxious waiting for those results. But I was just kind to myself, and there wasn't too much I could do about that except, you know, self-love and self-care, and just trying to be patient and fill my life with distractions and things that I love in the meantime. But just accepting that, unfortunately, that was the vibe that I left with, and it was hard to shake, and I was just going to be a little bit of a nervous Nancy for a little while, and that's okay. If that's you, that's totally okay. It happens to a lot of us. And then other days I was just like, well, I have no idea where I sat with that. I don't know how I did. I don't know what I'm going to get, so I'm not going to worry about it. And I just totally forgot about it. I purposefully didn't look up the day that we were going to get it back, and I just waited until I just got that shocking email one day and found out my score. So whatever works for you, I think just a lot of self-care, looking up, and just, yeah, finding a buddy that you can talk to about it, whether it be somebody in your course, a family member, a complete stranger on Instagram that's been going through the same thing as you. Just finding somebody to have that vent to is really nice, who understands what you're going through. Sometimes your partner or a family member who hasn't been there can get a little bit over hearing about the GAMSAT, which my friends and family did for sure. So people like Emma that I met on Instagram were always like a really awesome help. Yeah, but don't be too hard on yourself. It's a difficult exam for everybody. Keep yourself with distractions or a good Netflix show or something, and just, yeah, the results are gonna be there no matter what. There's nothing you can do once you leave that exam.
Yeah, I think that's like the really good message is, like, what will be will be. You've done all the hard work leading up to it. You showed up, you did your work on the day, and you've just got to spend the next month or whatever telling yourself, like, well, I did it. I did what I could. There we go. And just kind of ride the waves. It's kind of the same for any big, like, you're waiting for anticipation, and you're going to experience this again. Your GAMSAT score, and then your application, and then like your interview, and then getting in. Like, there will always be these times where you have done everything you can, and you've just kind of put it in the hands of someone else to review and to mark or approve or whatever, and you just gotta live with it. But I think, yeah, talking to a buddy, someone who's going through it, someone who's not tired of you ranting about it, which my friends did too. If you need to have a vent, have a vent. If you need to have a chill, have a chill. And if you are having a good day, then just keep on with your life, because life is still continuing. We had someone ask about sort of knowing if your score is good enough. Now, obviously, medical schools do have minimums, so they'll post those, so you do know if it's like not at all even worth. But do you have any sort of rule of thumb, or how did you know that your last score was gonna, or did you know that your last score was gonna be the one that was good?
So I suppose every school has on their website, or GAMSATs will have on their website, that most schools are a minimum of 50 in each section. I think some are 55, and a minimum of 50 or 55 overall to apply. But if you're getting scores around that mark, you're still not going to get in. I think that they keep them that low on purpose just to make money, unfortunately, which really sucks. But these days it's getting more and more and more competitive. You have to have a pretty good GPA and a pretty good GAMSAT. If one of those is a little bit weaker, then the other has to be a lot stronger to compensate for it. So that's going to change things up. There's no like everybody needs this, everybody needs that. It's just playing to your strengths and weaknesses again. But if you've got like a GPA of a 5.5, you're going to have to get a pretty insane GAMSAT, like an 88 or a 90 to get in. But if you have a 7 GPA, maybe you only need a 60 something to get in. So it just depends. But my big tip is to email every single school that you are interested in going to. And I did this every single year. I either went to I've flown to nearly every single medical school in Australia and gone to their open days to meet the admissions people and be like, hi, I love you. Please pick me. And like find out which programs I was genuinely interested in, and I found out a few probably weren't right for me just because of the culture there, or just things that I was looking for that were important to me that they didn't offer. So I found that really helpful. But for scores, you can either go to their open days or just email them, because they will have the scores from the year before that they can send you, so you'll have those. And it's just hit or miss between which schools will also give you that year's exact cutoffs as well. Some do, some don't. Sometimes if you email multiple times, you'll get a different person working that day, and they'll give you, they might be the person that gives you the exact scores. And sometimes I also called. Again, this might seem a bit excessive and you don't have to do this. I just did it for 7 years, so I was making sure that my score was actually going to get somewhere and what I was aiming for. So yeah, if you want the accurate numbers, that's the best way to get them.
And you can also, like, you can divide and conquer amongst your like application friends and be like, hey, you call the Sydney schools, I'll call the Melbourne schools. But yeah, I give that advice a lot. Like, just ask the admissions team, because worst case, they say they can't give it to you, or they just don't, and you're no worse off. But usually you can find those previous numbers, and you can kind of base yourself around that. And just because we brought it up here, going to open days and asking questions about like what the culture is like, talking to students who are at the open days, really, really important, because you can spend a lot of time, effort, and money applying to all of the schools. And sure, that like, I mean, I'm someone who's like, if I get in, I get in, and I'm going wherever I go, no matter what the school is. But you can also really cater your applications and really cater your scores that you're aiming for and stuff for the schools that you know you really want to get to. And that's a whole other video on like how the Australian application system is different than the Canadian. But yeah, like, it's good to set a concrete goal of a specific school or group of schools, because that can help you in that motivating when you need it, when you're studying. You have like a concrete why. It's no longer, I want to go to med school, it's I want to be a student at this school because I really like the way they teach, or I really like their principles, their, I don't know, like their philosophy of teaching. And it like helps you kind of get to know people and like humanize the medicine when you talk to the people at the open days. But yeah, ask the school. If they don't tell you, then aim for the scores before it. But I definitely agree. Like, I always say in the Canadian system, there's the minimums, and then there's the true cutoff, and that is usually above the listed minimums, because things are businesses, and application fees pay for those businesses, unfortunately. Yeah, that's a shame. But now that we're sort of We've talked about the test itself, the day of the test, after the test. There were a couple of really good, like, reflecting questions, sort of like, now that you are where you are. One was, what would you tell your previous self when she was studying?
I think for me, when I was studying so long, I was waning in and out of hope because it was taking me so long. And I know people can feel that after doing 1 exam or 2 exams or 12 exams. And I think for me, it would have been really nice to have met somebody else that was in the same boat and had struggled quite as much as I did. And just for them to tell me, like, it doesn't matter. Like, it just doesn't matter. It doesn't matter when you get in. Like, we're so hung up on these arbitrary timelines in our lives, and we think that we have to achieve everything yesterday, but you just don't. And all of the experiences that I had in the years that I didn't get in are actually going to get me so much further in my medical career than if I'd got in straight away, because I'm able to do so much more now with the qualifications I was able to get and the volunteer programs and all of the jobs and experiences I've had. And not only is that going to boost my career forward faster, but it's going to make me a better doctor. And I'm so happy that all of this happened the way it did, and I have absolutely no regrets, because everything happens the exact way it's supposed to. So just trust in the timing of your life, and if you're struggling, it's for a reason. Maybe you're not supposed to get in this year because there is a really important experience that you're supposed to have that's going to make you the doctor you want to be later this year. So don't stress, it's all going to work out. And I think the thing that kept me going was remembering that you only fail when you stop trying. So you haven't failed until you stop trying. So just keep trying and you will inevitably get there. I promise.
That's fantastic advice. Honestly, just like clip out that video, save it, and listen to it for yourself whenever you're having a low moment while you're studying. I can't agree more. I always tell people, when I started applying for med school back home, Macquarie didn't exist. And the moment I found the Macquarie program, I knew, like, I always tell people, if you can, and again, the Australian system's different, but ignore the schools you know you have. Write down what your perfect school would be. What does it include? What does it focus on? What's the class size? Where is it? All of those kinds of questions. And then score your like preferences based off of which meets those the best. And I kind of did this throughout my time applying for med school as like sort of reminders of like, no, I really want to get in, and this is what kind of program I want. And when I was looking at programs in Australia, there was Macquarie, and I had written down I wanted small class sizes. I wanted it to be either in Sydney or Melbourne, just because that's the part of Australia I wanted to be in. I wanted to have a focus on global health, and I wanted it to be new, which is controversial, and there's Macquarie, right? And it didn't exist when I started applying for med school. So whether you are spiritual or not, it does really, once you get in, feel like everything along the way was just there to add to your experience and to get you to where you needed to be at the actual time you're meant to be there. And like you said, all of these experiences that I accumulated, I did a freaking master's while waiting to get into med school, which is going to make me a better doctor and going to give me other opportunities. So just keeping that reminder, everything will happen as long as you're putting in the hard work and you're not giving up. You'll get there and you can do it. We have a couple other questions. I kind of wish I asked that one last because I feel like that was a beautiful summary. Someone asked, what caught you off guard the most during the GAMSAT? Like, what was the most surprising? Maybe like the first time you wrote it or the first time you studied for it?
I suppose the most complained about thing at most sites is when there's noise complaints and there's just nothing you can do. I remember one time the original test center used to be near like a race course, and there was a race, like a big one that people had like bought tickets to and were really excited about, and of course I had no idea, and it was just down the road and you could just hear new all day, and it was really distracting because I had been studying in like a silent area for months and wasn't used to these random noises. And then another year, I'm not even kidding, this is the weirdest thing that's ever happened, but it was like this big glass wall next to us, and all of a sudden this marching band made up of bagpipes just decided that they were having a practice outside in like this courtyard, and they were playing Riptide and Star Wars, and it was insane, and I just couldn't stop laughing, but it was so distracting. So I think when you're studying, don't necessarily have your noise cancelling headphones all the time. Get used to noises around you. Like if your brother is screaming in the next room, like get used to that, because if you can study through that, you can study through anything that happens on the day and that'll be fine.
Yeah, like build up your ability to kind of tune things out without the headphones doing it for you. That's so funny. I'd be so annoyed. I mean, my last exam this year I was placed beside the window, which was open and it had to be, and they started doing yard work just right outside the window, and I'm just like, thank you so much. I'm not stressed at all. I don't need a weed whacker going me in the background. Great. But I still passed, so there you go.
One of the worst things that ever happened to us was 20 people in the middle of the exam room didn't get a page in their booklet. And it was chaos. Nobody knew what to do because all of the booklets are assigned in an exact order so that the person either side of you has a different arrangement of questions. They might even have different questions to you that you won't even see. And it's to avoid copying each other, so you can't just look over and answer a C where they have a C. And if they have that many stuff up, the entire algorithm is destroyed. And you can't just replace the one book. So they had to call people to come in and fix it. So we were stuck under exam conditions because we just had reading time for over an hour. We couldn't move, we couldn't do the test, couldn't do anything. It was horrible. So the whole day was just like a disaster after that. And I'm sure that won't happen if it's moving online, but just be aware for like technical difficulties and delays and just find a zen place within.
You're there, you're already there, you just gotta kind of go with what the day is gonna throw at you. As a complete aside, as someone who didn't have reading time until we got here, like, we weren't allowed to answer questions, but we could write on the test during our like reading time. I hate reading time. Anyways, the last question is there anything you would change if you had to sit it for that, you know, lucky number 13? Or would you just keep with, I think we've already kind of touched on it, like, because you've been improving and changing your study methods each time around, but is there any last thing that you had in the back pocket to use this if you had to do it one more time?
I suppose I'd just done so many of the different courses and things, and by the end of it I was kind of just using what I'd already done, but my own way, I suppose. Mm-hmm. But I think the biggest thing for me was finding that person that I worked really well with, my friend at the farm. And we often talk about our stupid times together studying for the GAMSAT, but how much we grew as people from that experience. So if you can find somebody that is really going to get this journey with you and make you a better person and a better studier and a better doctor in the long run, I think that's the best thing you can do for your study, because they keep you accountable, they keep you motivated, they make it enjoyable, they make it less stressful. I found it really hard to find somebody like that, and a lot of people were negative or competitive and lied to you, and that sucks. And it took me 6 years before I found this really great person. So if you find someone, hang on to them, and hopefully it doesn't work out the way it did for me, and so many people kept getting in and were all doctors while I was still sitting the GAMSAT. But if that does happen to you, like, don't stress, because then you've got a friend in medical school who can tell you things about medical school when you're ready, and hopefully they can mentor you in a different way by then. So it all works out in the end. You just have to figure out what's right for you. Don't stress about what everybody else is doing, and just go with the ride.
My favorite, like, one-liner advice that I always try to, like, use to, like, anchor myself back is run your own race, right? So if you can find that person that's going to run a race beside you but not run in the same race, so, like, no competitiveness, no, like, ill intent, that's how you gotta go. Okay, so that is all of the questions we have. I think that was a really, probably a long video once I put it all together, but I think there's some really great advice there. Like I said, all of Emma's stuff will be linked down below, so make sure you go follow her. Thank her for these awesome tips. Ask her more tips if you have more questions. And I just want to say thank you so much, Emma. I'm not looking at you right now because I'm looking at the camera, but it was awesome to get to sit and chat with you, and I know it's going to help so many students and so many pre-meds, and probably like these pre-meds who have been on similar journeys to us that haven't been quite straightforward. And I love seeing that and seeing that support for that community. Is there anything that you wanted to say as a little sign-off?
Thanks so much for having me, Em. It's been so much fun spending the afternoon chatting all things GAMSAT with you. For anybody wanting more support, please do not hesitate to reach out to us at Med Mentors. If you haven't heard about us yet, we are a nationwide volunteer group made up of medical students. If you would like to be paired with a mentor who's in a current medical school program in Australia, just let us know. We'll leave the link to the website below. We'll be doing the match in February or March, and we can hook you up with your very own personal med mentor, and you can ask them any questions that you might have along your journey. and hopefully we'll be seeing you in the hospitals and working together very soon.